Gene here. Just a quick request before we get into today's show. You may or may not know this, but the most common way for someone to find a podcast is from a recommendation from a friend. And this happens for two reasons. One is there are over 550,000 podcasts in the Apple podcast ecosystem, which means finding any one show is a difficult thing. And two, and I only have the statistics for the United States, so that's why I'm sharing it this way. Only 17% of the American population listens to a podcast on a weekly basis. So that means 80%, more than 80% of the population is not listening to podcasts regularly. And many of them, more than 60%, have never listened to a podcast in their life. So I spend a lot of time and effort in the podcast so that it is something that is good and useful for you. It would mean the world to me if you would share the podcast with a friend or two. And if you just send them to tappingpodcast.com, there's all the instructions on how you can get every episode absolutely free. But in addition to that, you can see the entire archive. Even though this is episode 331, we're closing in on 400 episodes between full episodes, bonus episodes. And it would mean the world to me if you would take the time to share this with someone else. This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 331, originally aired October 3rd, 2018. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today, we're going to be talking about grief, but we're going to be talking about it in a really unique way. We're going to be talking about grief for everything that is not about death. And we'll get into that in a moment and why that is an important thing to do. If you haven't done so, you should check in the archive, listen to episode 328 and 330. So that was last week's episode and an episode from 3 weeks ago. The response has been really amazing because of the kind of depth and the concepts that we were talking about. One of them, we talk about how you build your beliefs and how the way we build our beliefs prevents and slows the healing process. That's 328. And in 330, we have a really long conversation and a useful conversation about why do I feel worse even though things are getting better? Because that's something that happens a lot. Tappingpodcast.com. You can check out all the archives, 328, 330, really great episodes to check out. A big shout out and thank you to all of the supporters of the Tapping Q&A podcast. I just posted 2 new custom tapping scripts, one for never feeling like you're ever going to make it, the other feeling like there is too much to do and you're going to break before you get done. If you are a supporter at a level to receive that, all you need to do is check your inbox and you will see information about how to get that. If you would like to receive some custom tapping scripts and have access to the donors only podcast that goes out once a month, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/support. So it makes a lot of sense that we would feel and experience grief after someone dies, because that's the place that we most commonly associate that emotion. Grief is about the loss of life. Grief counselors almost always, or at least the way that you think about them, almost always are dealing with the loss of a loved one. But one of the things that has happened a lot, and maybe it's been happening more, or maybe just because I noticed it, I'm noticing it more, kind of like when you decide you're going to get a certain car and all of a sudden everywhere you look, they're there, and it's not as if they just magically showed up, but you're noticing it. So this is something I've noticed a lot recently. And what I've noticed is in lots of issues, as we've been doing some tapping, and we're maybe 5 or 6 minutes into tapping on the issue, and we've kind of cleared the surface, because initially, oftentimes with my clients, it's a whole constellation of emotions. It's kind of like a ball of necklaces that have gotten tangled up that we're trying to untangle. And so in the beginning, we're just kind of clearing the decks. And so after the first round of tapping, I always like to check in with my clients. I'm like, so what do you experience? What do you notice? And the thing that we notice, which is really surprising, is they always say, there's this feeling of sadness. And as they say that, they're surprised by the fact that sadness has come up. Or they'll say, I'm feeling a sense of grief. Again, they're surprised because we're not talking about the death of a loved one. But what grief and sadness say is they're saying that there is something that is really important to me that I'm no longer connected with in the way that I was before. And so with that definition, it makes perfect sense after someone we know has died to feel that way, because that is truly what has happened, is we no longer have the opportunity to experience them in this world the way we did before. And our system is just saying, man, that was so important to me. And I just feel bad that I don't get to keep experiencing that in the exact same way. But that sort of sentiment is not isolated to and specific only to the loss of a loved one. It has to do with any sort of loss at all. We can feel grief when we are leaving a job, when we are leaving a relationship, when we recognize an opportunity we really thought we were going to have doesn't come to fruition. Or the one that has been coming up the most with my clients is people who have known something for a really long time, but didn't take action towards it, and they wasted that time. So like they know I am called to have this profession or do this work, and they drag their feet and they don't take action. And so what they're mourning is the loss of opportunity and the loss of time, because they had a clear idea of where they were heading and they just didn't. And because we so specifically associate grief with death and sadness with injury to the people around us, we often miss it when we're talking about the end of things that are important, the loss of time, or the loss of opportunity that never came to fruition. And if we're not thinking about it, if we're not aware of it, if we don't realize it's a thing we need to deal with, then we're not going to tap for it because we don't know exactly that as an entry point. And so what happens is, because we're not naming the grief, we're not naming the sadness, we might be tapping and we might be making progress, but because we're not on the mark, we're just kind of chipping away at the edges versus getting to the core of what is going on. And I'm consistently saying with my clients that fully articulated emotions are short-lived, meaning that when we step into them, we listen to them, we name them, they do their job, and they move on. So today what we're going to do is we're going to be tapping on grief and sadness for everything that has nothing to do with death, because that's a really different approach, and that's a lot more straightforward. This one's a little bit coming in the side door. So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about something that has ended that you feel bad about that it's ended. Could be a relationship, could be a job, or could be something that changed dramatically. You know, you had a good friend who lived in town and now they've moved across the country and you still love each other, but you don't get to have coffee on a Tuesday morning. You don't get to connect in the exact same way. Or I want you to think of time that was lost, something that you wanted to do that you just drug your feet on and you're stuck in the exact same spot. So to begin with, tap on the side of the hand, just take a nice big deep breath. Another nice big deep breath. Still on the side of the hand, one more deep breath. And just move from tapping point to tapping point in the order that makes sense to you, just repeating after me. I don't like feeling grief. I don't like feeling sadness. Because those emotions are about being in contact with, focusing on, and dwelling on something that I am missing. I'm paying attention to something that is lost. And I don't like being reminded of loss. I hate seeing opportunities that I was hoping for pass me by. I'm hurt by the time that I lost because I did not act sooner. And the sadness that I am feeling is simply pointing out that loss. is simply pointing out what has been missed. And because of the nature of sadness, it's often lurking in the background. Because it's not the primary emotion that I feel, I miss it. In this moment, I give the sadness permission to have full voice. In this moment, I give the sadness permission to be heard. It's good to acknowledge what is lost. It's good to acknowledge what I'm no longer connected to. It's good to acknowledge that things have been missed. But I don't have to stay stuck in that missing. I don't have to stay stuck in that longing. I don't have to stay stuck in the sadness. I give myself permission to hear the sadness and let it go. I give myself permission to experience the grief and to release it. Even though things have been lost, even though opportunities have been missed, even though time has been wasted, I can move forward in a healthy way. I can remember what is lost without being stuck in the sadness. I can say what is lost is still important and let go of the grief. I don't have to stay in the grief in order to learn from the past. I don't have to stay in the grief to say that the thing that was lost is important. The sadness has done its job. I can be in this moment fully present, knowing what is important to me, and not be stuck in the sadness. Nice deep breath. Because we were just tapping on an issue that was kind of bubbling under the surface. Again, when someone dies, the sadness is the primary emotion. When something is lost, it's usually not. And so when we do a tapping like this, because it is an emotion that's under the surface, the first time through that tapping, you might feel an acuteness of the emotion. That the emotion itself might grow instead of receding and letting go. And that's just because we're taking this thing that is impacting us, that is stealing energy, that is in the background the whole time, and we're just bringing it to the foreground. And in that, it can feel bigger. So if that's your experience, go back to it again. You know, on the second pass and the third pass, you're going to start releasing it and letting it go in a different way. Take the script, go to the website, print the script out right below the audio player, tappingpodcast.com, episode 331. If you happen to be listening to the website right now, you'll just see it below the player. I've typed out that tapping script so you can print it out and take it with you, because sometimes we don't always have access to audio like this. But I'd really encourage you to keep poking on this one for a little while. Even if it's just every day for a week, you'll be surprised at the lightness that you will feel moment to moment when this residual background grief and sadness is let go. It's kind of like when you're in a restaurant that's gotten really, really noisy because lots of people are there. And then the next minute, you know, a number of parties have left and all of a sudden it's just quiet. And you didn't realize how noisy the restaurant had gotten until the quiet returns. Letting go of grief and sadness that's in the background will do the exact same thing. This burden will be lifted. It'll become lighter. It'll become easier for you to navigate and move forward in a useful and productive way. So go back, re-listen to this. As always, if you know someone in your life who could benefit from a conversation like this or the tapping that we just experienced right now, please be our ambassador. Like I said at the top of the show, the easiest way for someone to find a new resource is for you, someone they love, to pass it along to them. Don't spam your inbox. Don't send it to every person on the planet. But by passing it along, it'll make a real difference, and I will appreciate it greatly. If you'd like to support the podcast, tappingqna.com/support. If you have not done so already, go to tappingpodcast.com so you can have the podcast delivered to your smart device automatically without you having to worry about catching an email or looking for something. We have instructions for Apple, for Android, for your home smart device, your Alexa, and every other way under the sun to consume audio. If you have a question or comment, I can always be reached, Gene, Gene, at tappingqna.com. On the website, just click Contact Us up at the top. If you're in the app, click the Contact section. You can send me an email. You can even leave me a voicemail right from inside of the app. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.